The text message was still glowing on my cracked screen, a digital phantom in the morning light. See you at the office at 9 a.m. It was currently 7:45 a.m., and I was standing in a forest, wearing a dress that was mostly prayers and emerald thread, with a silver wolf etched into my skin. I looked at Alexander. He was staring at the same mark on his own hand, his thumb tracing the fine silver lines of the wolf's head. He didn't look like a man who had just survived a supernatural coup. He looked like a man who had finally found the rhythm he'd been looking for his entire life. The board isn't human anymore, Alexander repeated, his voice low. Your father's frequency didn't just wake the hounds, Sasha. It recalibrated the city. Then we don't go in as CEOs, I said, my voice finding that new, resonant hum. We go in as alphas. The drive back to the city was surreal. Marcus was silent, his eyes fixed on the road, but I noticed the way his grip on the steering wheel had changed. His knuckles weren't white with fear anymore. They were relaxed, his movements fluid and unnervingly precise. When he looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes didn't just see his boss. They saw a North Star. As we crossed the bridge into the financial district, the city felt different. The smog seemed to have cleared, replaced by a crisp, sharp clarity. The people on the sidewalks weren't shuffling. They were moving with purpose, their heads up, their gazes sharp. It was as if the entire population had collectively decided to stop being prey. We pulled up to the Volkovich Monolith at exactly 8:55 a.m. The building didn't look like a corporate headquarters anymore. The black glass seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, a deep forest green that matched the eyes I'd seen in the woods. The security guards at the door didn't ask for ID. They didn't even move. They simply bowed their heads as we passed, a silent acknowledgement of the silver marks on our hands. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and silence. Sitting on the minimalist stone benches were the vultures, the board members from both families who had spent years trying to tear us apart. But they weren't arguing. They weren't whispering. They were sitting in a perfect semicircle, their eyes fixed on the express elevator. My Uncle Arthur was at the center. He stood up as we approached, his expensive suit miraculously unwrinkled. And he didn't look like a man who had been blackmailed at a gala. He looked like a soldier awaiting orders. Sasha, he said. The word carried a weight I'd never heard from him. Alexander, the chairs are ready. Who called this meeting, Arthur? I asked, my voice echoing through the lobby. The blood did, Arthur replied. And for a split second, I saw his eyes flicker, a quick, bright flash of silver. We felt the grounding at the well. We felt the shift. The old contracts are void. The new pack is waiting for a directive. Alexander stepped up beside me, his hand finding the small of my back. The heat of his touch was a grounding wire, a reminder that I wasn't doing this alone. And Osric? Alexander asked. Osric is no longer part of the executive structure, Arthur said, his expression neutral. The frequency he triggered was too much for his heart. He died a dinosaur, just like he wanted. Alexander didn't flinch. He simply nodded. Take us up. The express elevator ride felt like an ascent to another world. When the doors opened onto the top floor, the boardroom was transformed. The mahogany table had been cleared of laptops and folders. In their place were ancient stone-bound ledgers and a single heavy silver bowl, filled with clear water from the Wolters estate. 12 people sat around the table, 6 from Volkovich, 6 from Wolters. They were the most powerful people in the city, and they were all looking at us with a hunger that had nothing to do with money. Sit, I said. They sat. I walked to the head of the table, Alexander taking the chair to my right. I looked at the 12 faces. I'd seeing the silver marks on their hands, the sharp focus in their eyes. They were the first generation of the corporate pack, refined, dangerous, and utterly loyal. The merger is complete, I began, my voice steady. But the terms have changed. We aren't here to manage assets. We're here to manage the evolution. The Wolters-Volkovich empire will no longer operate on greed. We operate on instinct. We protect our own, and we eliminate the rot. A low, collective hum of approval vibrated through the room. It wasn't a sound of voices. It was a resonance of spirits. Our first priority, Alexander added, his voice a commanding rumble, is the cleanup. The hounds who didn't survive the transition need to be handled. The Alzaranis need to understand that the city is now under a single banner. We aren't rivals anymore. Then we are a pack. For the next hour, the meeting proceeded with a terrifying efficiency. Decisions that would have taken months were made in seconds. There was no bickering, no ego, only the collective drive to strengthen the territory. I felt the fever in my blood settle into a cold, diamond-hard focus. I wasn't a girl playing at CEO. I was the alpha. But as the meeting drew to a close, the air in the room suddenly shifted. The water in the silver bowl began to ripple. I looked at the water. It wasn't reflecting the ceiling lights. It was reflecting an image, a dark, rain-slicked street in a part of the city I didn't recognize. In the center of the street stood a man. He was wearing a tattered white suit, stained with black ichor. His face was a mask of ruined flesh, his black eyes burning with a hatred that felt like a physical weight in the room. He wasn't dead. He had crawled out of the fissure, but he wasn't alone. Standing behind him were dozens of figures, men and women in civilian clothes, their eyes glowing with a flat, dead black. They weren't hounds, they weren't pack, they were something else. The void, Alexander whispered, his hand tightening on mine. He didn't just trigger the blood, Sasha. He triggered the shadows. My father, or the thing that wore his face, looked directly into the camera of the water. He raised a hand, and the black light from his palm shot toward the surface. The silver bowl exploded. The board members leapt back as shards of silver and water flew across the room. The lights in the monolith flickered, the green glow turning a sickly, pulsating gray. "He's in the building," Uncle Arthur gasped, his silver eyes wide with terror. The building's security alarm didn't go off. Instead, a sound began to echo through the ventilation shafts, a sound I'd heard in the woods, but amplified 1,000 times. It was the sound of a heartbeat, a black, rhythmic thud that was coming from the very basement of the monolith. "He didn't come for the meeting," I said, the alpha mark on my hand beginning to burn with a white-hot light. "He came for the throne." The doors to the boardroom suddenly groaned, the heavy steel buckling inward as if hit by a battering ram. The green lights died completely, plunging us into a terrifying, absolute darkness. And then in the silence, a voice whispered, not through the air but directly into the minds of everyone in the room. "The merger is just beginning. Our children, and I've brought the silent partners." The floor beneath us began to liquefy, turning into a pool of black, ink-like ichor.
Hit the subscription button for Episode 7, where Sasha and the pack must defend the monolith against the silent partners of the Void, while Alexander discovers a secret buried in the building's foundation that could change the war forever.